Hello, friends, welcome again. We are learning constraints, and in our previous sessions, right before this, we have talked about a few constraints which are very important for us to know. What were those? We talked about check constraint, check constraint, right? Check constraint, and then we talked about not null constraint, and we talked about primary key constraint. So, if you can recall what is check constraint, where we give some condition and the condition should not be violated, like age should be greater than zero, right? Not null means where null values are not allowed, and primary key means where the value should be unique. That means duplicates are not allowed, plus even nulls are not allowed. Now, in this session, we will be looking at unique key constraint, right? The fourth one in the list. Now, as the name suggests, unique key means this is unique. It won't allow duplicates. Then you will say, Sumit sir, we just now learned primary key and that was the same. That primary key will not allow duplicates. Then what is different between unique key constraint and the primary key constraint? So you remember I said primary key constraint will not allow null values, not even one null value. But unique key can allow any number of null values. That's the only difference. So if you ask me, uh, primary key equal to unique key plus not null constraint. But again, this combination only for one particular column, right? That means you cannot have more than one primary key in a table, but you can have any number of unique keys in a table, right? You can have any number of unique keys. That means I can have a unique key on email, I can have a unique key on phone number, and so on. But primary key can be only one because that's one per table. It's a table level constraint. But unique key, is it a table level constraint? No, we can have multiple unique keys, right? So now let's consider this customers table. And in this table, uh, for example, you think about customer ID. Ideally, what should be the constraint on this? Whatever you have learned, primary key ideally, right? It should be a primary key. First name, ideally, it should be a not null constraint. Last name, it should also be a not null constraint. Email ID, email ID. Let's say I want to make this optional. Then you will say, okay, do not put not null constraint. But tell me, email ID be uh, can email ID be duplicated? No, it should be actually unique across all users. But nulls are allowed because it's, let's say, optional field, but two users cannot have the same email ID. So that is where I should put a unique key constraint on email ID, and same way I should put a unique key constraint on phone number because nulls are allowed, but two people cannot have the same phone number. It's okay if person has not mentioned the phone number, so it might show as null, but two people should not have the same phone number. So that is where you should not put a primary key on email and phone number kind of things. Rather, it should be a unique key. And how do I put that? I can say unique key. And same way I put down, right? You can just put unique, I guess that also works. If you put unique key, that also works. You can try that out, but this should work. So let me create this table. Before that, might be the table is already there. I will say drop table customers. Let me try seeing if it is there. It was not there, so that's fine. So we say create table customers and all of this. The table is created. The table is created. Now let me try inserting a few records. So let me insert this one first. Let me insert this. So I'm inserting the first customer, Richard, and his email is richard at gmail.com and some phone number. That's fine. Let me try running this. And you can see it worked. And it has to work, right? It has to work. Now, let me try putting the second person, Mary, and you see the phone number is repeating. Will this be allowed? Will this be allowed in this case? No, it should violate the unique key constraint. And it says duplicate entry for key customers dot customer phone number. Not allowed. Right? That's how unique constraint works. Let's say if this person has not provided value itself for this. This person has not provided the value itself for this particular field, which is phone number. Will this be allowed? It worked. It worked. Now let's say, uh, okay, customer ID I should have put two. Anyways, I forgot. That's fine. We have not put primary key, so it worked, right? There was a technical glitch, and whatever I have recorded from this point onwards just went away. So I am re-recording it, right? So by this time, you know that unique key constraint do not allow duplicate values, but nulls are allowed, right? That's what you have understood. And since I was in a flow that time, I mean, I do not know what happened, but what I'm doing, I have dropped the table and recreated it right now, right? And if I insert both these records with the same phone number, it won't allow, right? That's what you kind of understood. It will not allow. It will insert one, but it will give error for the second one. That's what it did. We can see that, right? So you can see first one succeeded, second one said duplicate entry. Okay. Now I said nulls are allowed. So let me just delete from customer so that there is no data, right? And now instead of this phone number, let me give a null here, right? Will this work? Will this work if I'm just giving a null? It should. It worked. What if I give a null here also? What if I give a null here also? Will this work? There is already one null in this column, and don't you feel this will become the same, right? You might feel then, it cannot be duplicate, and then these two nulls are duplicate. But to your surprise, I will show you that this will work fine. Now you will say, wait. So, Mr. Just now you mentioned that duplicate values are not allowed, and you inserted two nulls. This is duplicate. How it worked? Remember, null, even though you see two nulls same, but two nulls are never the same, right? You cannot compare nulls. Null means absence of a value, right? So two nulls are never the same. It's not a string like null, right? So I hope you can understand that any number of nulls are allowed in your when you have a unique key constraint, right? So this should help you out, I believe. Okay. Now, with this, you understood a unique key constraint. That means for your columns like email ID, phone number, user ID, all of this where two people cannot have the same things, right? Then it should be unique key constraint. And let's say someone do not want to give phone number, but two people cannot have the same phone number. So unique key constraint is the best fit for such things. Okay, fine. So now I want to ask you few things. Let's say you have an employees table and you have five columns: employee ID, first name, last name, email, and hiring date, right? Hire underscore date. Okay, you have these things. Now, can you tell what will be the best constraint for employee ID? It's an employees table and you have employee ID. So you would uniquely want to identify each employee using employee ID. So it should be the primary key ideally. Primary key. First name. Ideally it should not be null, so not null. Last name, it should also not be null. Email. Person might not fill it, right? But two people cannot have the same email ID. So ideally it should follow the unique key constraint. Unique. Hire date. Anyways, hide it. I will leave as blank, no constraints. So let's say we have a users table with four columns: user ID, username, email, and password. So user ID can be the primary key. Username, ideally, two people cannot have the same username, but right. So I can say unique. Email, email also two people cannot have the same email. Unique. Password. If you are thinking unique, then your password and my password can be the same, right? Who knows, right? That we are keeping the same password or different. So it should be following a check constraint, I believe. In the sense we check whether it is having certain number of characters or not, whether it contain a numeric value, a digit, and so on. So can be having check constraints, right? And only when it is matching that standards, then it is accepted. So with this, you would have good clarity on what is a unique key constraint. Now, I mean, in interviews, a lot of people ask, what is the difference between primary key versus unique key constraint? Right? What is the difference between these two? And it is simple. You remember that primary key can be only one in a table, right? So it is a table level constraint that only one primary key is possible in a table, but we can have multiple unique keys in a table. That means if a if a table has 10 columns, might be four of them can be having unique key constraint, right? Now another difference is, uh, I would say, primary key primary key equal to unique key unique key plus not null constraint, not null constraint, right? That means it's a combination of unique key plus not null, because unique keys can allow null values, any number of null values, but primary key do not allow even a single null value, right? So that is one major difference. And this is important for scenarios like, let's say, phone number. Two persons cannot have the same phone number, but if they are not providing that, then it will be null, and that's totally fine, right? But when talking about a primary key, it can never be null. For example, in an employee table, employee ID cannot be null, right? So these are such use cases where definitely given a employee ID or a user ID or customer ID, we will be able to identify a record guaranteed, right? But with email IDs, if let's say someone has not provided, you cannot identify that record, right? That way. So I hope you have got a good idea about primary key versus unique key. You can have any number of unique keys in a table, but primary key can be only one, as it is a table level constraint. So with this, what all constraints we have covered? We started with a check constraint earlier, right? Check constraint. Then we talked about not null. We talked about primary key constraint, and then we talked about unique key constraint. Now, let me ask you, can you have unique key plus not null, right? That means, for example, if email is one of the column, then if email is one of the column, then is there a way that we can provide unique key constraint, and we can also provide not null constraint to this, right? So that it does not even hold null values and it becomes a mandatory field. Then you will say it becomes like a primary key. No, I mean, primary key can be only one in a table. If we are defining these two, then if you want, you can make it a primary key. It's up to you. But there can be some other primary key, and you can have this also if you want, right? That means it will be unique for all users, plus nulls are not allowed. It can happen that, let's say, customer ID is the primary key in this table, primary key, and email id is unique, is having a unique constraint, and also not null. It will not allow null values, right? It can very well be possible. So as you know, we are covering a SQL superstar program, a 50 days initiative that we have taken. Now, at this point, I'm sure you all would have subscribed to my channel, because that will be the motivating point for me. Because if I am teaching something and you guys like it, subscribe to my channel, click on the like button, mention in the comment about your learning experience, right? That's the motivation for a teacher, right? So make sure you do all of that, and from my side, I'll make sure to bring the top notch content. Now, as I said, SQL is the very first step which we will do in these 50 days. But after that, you should think of transitioning into data. SQL is one side which is important, but you have to take your career to the next level by learning more to this, right? It can be anything. And as you know, I have a data engineering program. I do not mean to say that you have to learn that from me, but I mean, you should definitely think that after SQL, what should be your next step? Data engineering is a very good career choice, and that's why I am covering things in a lot of detail because SQL plays a very important role, and I am going that extra mile in order to cover things just because I want you to be very good at SQL so that you can be good data engineers. And if you are hired as a data engineer, generally the salary ranges are between 3x to 6x of total years of experience. For example, a person with 5 years of experience might be earning a package between 15 lakh to 30 lakhs. A person with 10 years experience, total experience, I'm not talking about data engineering experience. A person with 10 years experience might be getting between 30 to 60 lakhs and so on in India. And this is, I am just talking about service based company. When you talk about product based companies, the salary packages will be a lot different. I have seen some of my students with just 5 or 6 years of experience working in top product based company earning more than a CR, of course, including stocks. So definitely you should think of a career transition if you are from any background, be it mainframe testing, support, data analyst, right, or ETL, anything. Data engineering is a very good career choice, and you can consider my ultimate data engineering program. For that, I will mention the link for my website in comments, and I'm saying that you can learn that by yourself too. But again, if you need a structured way, you can consider going through any of the courses. The ultimate data engineering program that I offer is a very trusted program and has brought a lot of results. You can see the link to my website in the description, and you can know the details about the ultimate program. So till now we have covered some constraints, and as you know, constraints are set of rules which you want to impose so that your data is more reliable, right? So we have talked about a check constraint, not null, primary key, unique key, and we even talked about the difference between primary key and unique key. Not just that, when to use what is also something that you know. You know, primary key is a table level constraint, but we can have multiple unique keys in a table. Now, what we have to cover now is default constraint and auto increment keys. This is what I will try to cover in this particular session. So let's get started. Okay, so let me see if I have the notes. Okay, so consider you have a employees table where you have employee ID, first name, last name, hire date, and status. I mean, you can see employee ID is int, first name is varchar, last name is varchar, hire date supposed to be a date, and status is varchar 10. And now what I'm trying to say that whenever we put or insert a employee in this table, 99% of the times we have to give the status as active, right? 99% of the times the status is active. Then instead of we typing it manually, I mean, is there a way that we can say that if we do not put this value of status, by default it considers as active? Is there a way that if I do not put a value, I understand it is active? So if you think, if I say insert into employees values this, so anyways, before jumping to the insert statement, let me write a create statement. But before that, I will drop table employees if the table is already there. If the table is already there, it will be dropped, right? So there is no table, that's fine. But sorry, employees. And before that, actually, I have to even connect to retail DB. So let me say use retail underscore DB, use retail DB. And after that, let me try dropping the employees table. If it is existing, it will drop. So it was there and it has dropped this. Perfect. Now let me create this simple employees table that I have. Right? I am creating this employees table and let me run this. This worked and there is nothing great about it. That's fine. Now, what if I want to enter the value of employee ID, first name, last name, and hire date? Will this statement work? Will this statement work? Just have a look at the statement. I have five columns here 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And here I am giving insert into employees values 1, 2, 3, and 4. Only four columns I am giving. Will it work? Of course, it will not because it will say number of columns do not match the number of values. You know that. And it says count column count doesn't match value count. That's what I was expecting, right? Fine. So what if I have to give only these four values? Then better way is I can give the column names. I can give the column names here. Insert into employees and I give the column names, values, this. Now, this will work or not? This will work or not? This should, but it will insert status as null because we have not provided the value. Let me show you. If I say select star from employees, right? Select star from employees, you see the value is null here. Do not worry about this row. I mean, some glitch with the ID, I believe. That's why you see all nulls in one of the row. But if I try to do a count star on this, it will show one row only. So ignore this. If you also get to know how to get rid of it, do let me know. But looks like this is a IDE issue, right? So only one row and status is null here. You can see this. Now, what if I want to make sure that if I'm not giving the value or if I would have run this like this, by default, the value should not go as null for the columns I'm not giving. It should go as some value which we define. In this case, active, right? So, how to go or do that? So, what we can do? We can define something like default and I can say active. That means default value will not be null. If I'm not providing, please do not take null, rather take active as a value. Ideally, the default value is null, right? So I will run this. So before that, I will quickly drop this. I dropped it and I will create this employees table again with this default constraint and default value will be active. If I do not provide a value, it should be active. And now if I run this, let's see what happens. I run the same thing. I have not provided the value for status and it shows active as a value. Perfect. That's what I want. Right? Now, even if I do not provide value, it will be active. Now, let me delete this record. Delete from employees. So, it should delete all the records. Right now, there is one record which will be deleted. And if I say select star, fine. You see, after deleting all records, also this row is coming like null, 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 but it's not a row, it's some ID issue. Now, the same command, what I have written, I'll just show you that. This command, whatever I have written, we could have even done it this way. Insert into employees values, employee ID 2, first name Rahul, last name Sharma, hire date, I am giving some date, and status. I am saying default. I am saying default, right? So, what is default value? Active. This will also lead to the same thing, right? So, let me just show you that this will also work. And if I say select star from employees, you can see to Rahul Sharma, hire date and active. So either you do not provide the value or you mention the value as default. It should not be inside any single quotes. If you put it in single quotes, no, this becomes a value itself. this becomes a value itself. No, you do not provide that, and that's why you see ID gives a different color to it. It's a default value you are providing. And what is the default value? Active. I hope this is fine, right? Just have a look at it. I believe this should be okay. Now, let's say I want to give the value as inactive. There is some new employee which is joining, and I want to give the value as inactive. How to do that? Let me just copy this. I can say employee ID, first name, last name, hire date, and status. Since I'm providing all the columns here, I mean, even if I remove all of this, it's fine, it should work. Values one, couple. So let me give different name, Jane, let's say Smith, and date should be fine. And I explicitly mention inactive. Inactive. Then the status will be inactive for this particular user. So let me just show you that. Okay. And I say select staff from employees, and you can see this Jane Smith is inactive. So you kind of understood what is the default constraint. That means by default the value is this. If you do not give it, it's this, right? Whatever value we provide. So I mean, you can think that instead of null, the default value is something that we define. Is null allowed for this? Is null allowed? Because if you do not enter, the value is not going as null. So is null allowed? Explicitly, if you mention, then it is allowed until you give the not null constraint, right? So, for example, let's say if I say 4 and change some name, instead of this, I just put this and I say null here. Remember, null is not enclosed again in this. This becomes a string. No. So, null is a different keyword. It should be like this. Now, if I give this, it should take. It should take. And if I say select star from employees, we can see null here. Now, if you do not want this column to take null and should have a default value also, then you mention not null constraint also. How you can mention? You can say here status varchar 10 not null default active. That's how you can do that. I believe you would have understood this particular scenario. Okay, now let me talk about one more scenario. Let's say we have an orders table, we have order ID, customer ID, product ID, quantity, and order date. Let's say we have this. My focus is now on, let's say, order date. So I'm saying if I do not provide the order date, please take the current date, today's date, as the order date and put it. Right? Right now, I mean, if you do not put order date with this definition, it will be null if you do not put, because by default the value will be default value is null, but you want current date, and MySQL gives you a function called as current date. I'll just show you what you have to do. You can say default current date. That's how you can mention this. That means if you do not provide value, it will be today's date. I'm not talking about time, date, right? So let me run this orders table. If the table is already there, it will throw error. So table is there. So let me quickly drop it. Drop, drop table orders, right? Okay. And let me run this. I run this. And now what I will do, I will try to insert values, but I will not insert the value for order date. So I will just insert value for order ID, customer ID, product ID, and quantity, which I have put here, right? Or I could have written it, or if I want to do it differently, the same thing, I could have removed all of this also and should have said default, right? Both the things are same. This is equivalent to this. So let me run this. Let me run this, and you can see this has worked. I will say select star from orders. Select star from orders. And let's see. You can see today's date. Today's date, 10th July 2024. I hope this makes sense to you. And this also would result in the same thing. So, which you pretty much know by this time, right? Okay. Can order date hold null? If you explicitly mention null, it will hold because there is not null constraint is not there on this. If you do not want it to hold nulls, give a not null constraint also. You can combine constraints if it is logical to do so, right? Okay. I'll take another example. Let's say you are a startup based out of US, right? Based out of USA, you are a startup. Now, right now, you do not have plans to expand. You might do it later, but right now, you are a USA based startup, and we have a customers table. So, you expect customers from USA, which you are handling. So, customer ID, first name, last name, and country is there. That means I understand my country will be mostly USA, right? So, I want to give USA as the default value. So, I can say default, default USA, right? And if I do this, of course, if I enter this, the value for country will be USA. If you want to specify something else, you have to explicitly mention it here as part of the values. Or if you want to mention null also, you have to explicitly mention here. So with this, I think you would have got an idea about this particular thing, that how a default constraint help you. How it helps you? It ensures it ensures data consistency, right? Ensures data consistency. It guarantees you that there is a default value which is automatically added when no explicit value is given. When you are not giving a value, a default value is added, that's guaranteed, right? And it helps to prevent null. It's not that you cannot enter null, but the default value is not null. So I mean, you will have more quality data and the data will be more reliable. Ideally, all the constraints help us with these things, right? So that's what this default constraint means. So with this, you would have got a pretty good idea about default constraints. Okay. So now let me talk about auto increment. Let me talk about auto increment. So now let me talk about auto increment. This is a very good thing that you will realize what it is. So basically, auto increment keys are mostly used for primary keys, right? I'll just write used for primary keys. And why it is done? Let's say you have a employees table, and whenever a new employee comes, it should have a new employee ID which should be unique, which is like a primary key, a unique identifier which can identify a record, right? Now, let's say you are a very big company. There are, let's say, uh, there are, let's say, 1 million employees. I'm not sure if any company has that 1 million employees. Let's say your company is a very big company with 1 million employees. Now, a new employee joins. Then, do you feel that when you are inserting a record, you manually remember what was the last inserted primary key and then you give the next key? So if you have to do that manually, you might end up making mistakes, you might end up repeating that value and so on. Can system take care for that? That automatically when a new record is added, please see what is the last value and then increment one and then add it. Right? That is what means auto increment, right? Auto increment keys. That means it will automatically add the next value without we manually tracking it. So for example, if this is one table, I can mention employee ID int, uh, auto uh, auto increment primary key. I'm saying employee ID is my primary key and it is a auto increment primary key. That means I will not manually give it. Rather, it will start from 1 and will keep adding 111 whenever a new value is added. So we will not pass this, right? So let me just show you this. I hope employees table is not there. If it is there, it will throw an error. It is there. So let me drop it. Drop table employees, right? And now let me create this employees table again. Done. Now if I enter the value, let's say I will not enter employee ID because system will take care and will make sure the value is unique for every user, right? So insert into employees first name, last name, hire date. I'm entering the value for only these three columns. So let's see what happens. If I enter this, I'm not entering the value for employee ID, which is a primary key. And if I say select star from employees, select star from employees, right? So you see one, John Doe and hired it. So you see employee ID is one. Have we given it? No. It auto created that. And next time when we create a record, it will automatically add a new value. So let me just show you that. Let's say another employee also joins. Another employee joins. Let's say Jane Smith. Same example we took earlier also, right? 2023 07, let's say 02, right? Let's say 03. You might get confused with that. Okay. Uh, Fine. And if I say select star from employees, what do you expect? You see employee ID is 2. It is auto generated, auto increment key. It's incremented by 1. I hope this would make sense, right? So you kind of understood, because if we have to manually track that what is the last value and we add 1 to it, why to take all of that pain? We might end up making mistakes. So now let me drop this employees table. Drop table employees, right? I've dropped it. Now what I will do is I will again create this table. I'll again create this table, right? Employee ID, int, auto increment, primary key, all of this same thing I am giving. I am recreating this table, and now what I want is that instead of starting the value from one, in the previous case you saw the values were starting from one to like that, right? Started from one, incrementing by one. What if you have a specific requirement that the value should start from 1000 onwards? Can be the case, right? So in that case, what you can do is you can say alter table name. That means we are altering the table. Auto increment equal to 1000. That means set the starting value for auto increment. And even if you cannot remember this, do not worry. Even if I have to do, I have to Google it, right? But for the session, I just noted it here. So see, as learning SQL is not like talking about syntax which is rarely used. It is like understanding the logic. It is like you knowing syntax which is most commonly used, right? So this is something which is very rare that you would have to do, and you can always Google it. So with this alter table name auto increment equal to 1000, this means that the values will start from 1000 onwards. And now instead of value getting incremented by 1, generally it gets incremented by 1. If you want to increment it by 2, let's say, then you will say set auto increment equal to 2. So set the auto increment value to 2. This will make sure that it increases by 2 every time. So, right? I hope this makes sense. Now, if I try running this insert, first insert, right? Let me say select star from employees, and it is 1001. From 1000 onwards, right? So 1001 is the first value here. And if I run this, what do you expect? what should be the primary key generated for this? 1003, because a increment of 2. So let's see. So you can see this. So can be, it can be that you have these kind of requirements, but I mean, uh, rare things and good to know. It's not that syntax is something that you have to by heart. That's okay. So I believe this should have given you a good idea about uh, what is auto increment and how it helps. So basically, if you think logically, whenever we have a primary key, it's hard that we ourselves manually enter the primary key, because you might end up giving duplicate values. So let system take care of that, because system will manage it automatically without you getting involved. It will generate a new key, a new value for that, right? So with this, we are done with this thing. And in this session, what have we done? We have talked about default constraints, and we have talked about auto increment, right? And both of these things can be really, really helpful when you are working in production databases. So with this, let me end the session, and we are now left with foreign key constraints, which I will cover in my upcoming session. Thanks a lot.